We are introduced to a 37-year-old man named Dekamoto who was laid off from his job from the recession and got evicted from his house for failing to pay rent. He found a cheap place to live and moved in right away. While investigating his new house for the first time, he notices a ghost stalking him called K and is annoyed. However, he doesn't have the funds to search for another place, so he decides to stay. He finds a DVD of a movie where an international student is haunted by the ghost of a victim of an accident, and the ghost drowns the student in pleasure. The man decides that he has to live with the ghost. The next time she stalks him, he confronts her and kisses her. She runs away, and he decides to sleep in the closet. While sleeping, she comes back, but he's ready for her. He kisses her again, doing more and more. She headbutts him and goes away for the night. Every night after that, she comes back, and each time they go a little further. One night, he thinks about how he wants to get along with her because they'll be living together when she shows up and crawls into his futon. They do Doujin things, and it cuts to the next day where he has won money at a pachinko place. He notes that he's been lucky ever since moving in, and notes that ghosts hate nasty things and steal souls. He notices a dress on sale while walking past a store. That night, he's reading the newspaper, and she appears. He gives her the dress as a gift, and she wears it. He tries to take a picture, but she doesn't show up on the camera, confirming that she really is a ghost. They then do it. The next day, he tells her that he'll be back by evening and leaves the house. He then hears yelling outside and goes to investigate. Outside, he sees his landlord behind a monk who's yelling at the door for a ghost to leave. The monk sees the man, and he rushes back into his room, but the monk runs up to him and pries open the door before he can close it. He says he senses a grave presence coming from his room and offers his services. The landlord says that he's been getting complaints from residents that they've been seeing objects moving on their own and hearing cries from people even when they're alone. He hired the monk to perform an exorcism on his property. Dekamoto insists his room is fine, but the monk is extremely persistent, so Dekamoto calls out the monk. He says that he'll come in the room to perform an exorcism, and then when he starts to feel a little better, the monk will try to sell him talismans and vases, taking advantage of him. The landlord hears this and calls off the monk, saying to wait things out. In the hall, he can hear the monk get permission from the landlord to stay in the hallway, so now Dekamoto can't go to the employment center. He checks on Kay and sees the monk's chanting is working on her. He kisses her and plugs up her ears with his fingers. After the chanting stops, he decides to go to the employment center tomorrow, and they do it. During it, he thinks about the paranormal incidents that have been happening around here. He notes that it obviously has something to do with Kay, and they won't stop until the incident is over. He heard from rumors that an accident happened in the building, and incidents have gotten worse because he moved here. He then wonders if him helping Kay is the cause for all of this, and questions why she can't rest in peace to begin with. Afterwards, he asks the landlord what happened in his room. He will tell him on the condition that he considers the exorcism. He tells him a story that happened over 50 years ago, where a newlywed couple moved into the apartment shortly after it was completed. They had a child together, but one day the husband died. The wife called the police, and they found evidence that suggested that the wife did it, so they arrested her. Further investigation found that the husband died from a heart attack due to extreme excitement when doing it with his wife, so they released her from custody. The media picked up on the story and reported on it in the newspaper. Because of that, she couldn't find a job and fell into poverty. She was then later found dead in her room. Dekamoto thanks the landlord for telling him and leaves. He concludes that that shouldn't be enough to cause the amount of paranormal activity happening. He goes back home to Kay, and he wants to find out if she can get pregnant, so they do it. Afterwards, he goes to a convenience store and sees a kid staring at him from across the street. Suddenly, a car crashes into a bus, causing the bus to crash into Dekamoto. He wakes up in the hospital and sees the kid standing next to his bed, and he says to not go near his mother. A nurse comes into the room, and he disappears. Back in his room, the monk and landlord are talking in front of his house, where they discuss about how he hasn't been home recently. Kay is sitting on the bed waiting for him to come home. They discuss possibly calling the police and any ways to contact his family. The landlord asks if the woman in the story earlier could have caused this, but the monk says he needs to investigate for more clues. We see that Kay has moved. Back in the hospital, Dekamoto has been in there for most of the week. He only told Kay he was going to the convenience store, so he's worried about her. When he leaves the hospital, his bill comes to 317,400 yen, and it's revealed he was in there for 14 days. He can't pay the bill and is encouraged to go to consultation. He goes home and wonders about the kid he saw. When he walks inside, Kay pounces on him, and he apologizes for being gone for so long. They go right into doing it. The kid is outside of the door, listening to them doing it. He walks through the front door, revealing that he is a ghost. He suddenly comes face to face with the monk. We cut to Dekamoto talking with Kay, and he says that he heard about what happened to her when she was alive. He says how he could be responsible for the increase in paranormal activity by doing it with her, and she'll end up getting exorcised. And since she can't get pregnant, it's probably for the best if she has her wish granted so she can pass on. She's shocked to hear this and starts crying. Dekamoto packs up his stuff and leaves when he's cut off by the monk on a motorcycle. He brings him back to his house where the boy is waiting, and the monk explains that the boy is the cause of the recent paranormal activity and the woman in Dekamoto's room is his mother. She was pregnant with him, but he died before he could be born. However, she had enough strength to recently give him a ghost body. He was surprised at his new body and had no control over his power, causing the activity in the area. He purposely tried to eliminate Dekamoto with the accident because of him being with his mom, but changed his mind while he was in the hospital. This is because he has a connection to her feelings and could feel that she missed him so much and couldn't go on without him. So his solution is to have the monk exorcise him. Dekamoto objects, saying that she'd be happy to meet him. The kid says he only has enough control of his power to stop causing incidents and maintain his form. However, he does want to meet her before turning into an evil spirit. They bring him to meet her, and Dekamoto finds out that her greatest wish was to have a child, and if she finds out she does have one, she'll pass on. After they reunite, the monk exorcises the kid, who was able to pass on after being acknowledged by his mother. The monk says that they still have to find a way to let Kay pass on in peace, and he agrees to help. Later, he is braiding her hair, where he thinks about how the hospital ended up paying his entire bill due to some clerical error. He thinks about how it would be much better for her to pass on than to stay with him and notices that her hair is getting longer. Outside his room, a man slides an envelope through the door. Dekamoto now has a job where they want his skills as an office worker. They are short on people, and the location is in an extremely remote area, so he's finally going home after being away for 2 weeks. He gets home and they do it. Later, he is talking to the monk at his home when Kay's son climbs out of a well, and Dekamoto is surprised to see him, thinking he went to heaven. The monk's well is connected to the afterlife, so he can freely travel between the two areas. The two of them go back to Dekamoto's home so he can visit his mother. Later, Dekamoto checks his mail and finds an envelope summoning him to the legal counseling office. The mail is from a lawyer that represented his mother, who died years ago. His mother inherited the inn where his grandmother lived, and he goes to inspect the inn to see if he wants to inherit it or not. He sees an altar and prays to it, but when he does, a woman comes up behind him. Back at his house, Kay hears someone calling her. She investigates, and the woman grabs her and says she finally found her. She creates the illusion that Dekamoto wants to do it with her, but she finds out it's fake and bursts into another room where she sees the woman on top of Dekamoto. She uses her powers to make her disappear and wonders how she got here. Kay picks up a photo on the altar and walks away. Later, at the legal counseling office, the lawyer explains to Dekamoto it took a while to find him after his mother's death and asks if he's going to accept the inheritance. He thinks that it would be dangerous for Kay to be close to the inn, so he's about to decline it when he gets possessed by the woman into saying yes. Later, back in his room, he goes to sleep with Kay, asking about the photo, but she doesn't answer. While sleeping, the woman comes into the room and releases a gas and liquid aphrodisiac, which causes Dekamoto and Kay to do it. We then see a flashback of a woman that explains she married into a family whose heir owned an inn. She then had a daughter, but the business began to fail, and her husband became abusive. She left her daughter to graduate from a girls-only school and poisoned her husband. However, one day she discovered that her daughter had ended things herself. After the flashback, we see the monk be surprised at the person coming out of the well. Back at Dekamoto's room, Kay wakes up to see the woman doing it with him. The woman says she missed Kay, and it's revealed that she is Kay's mother, and the mother and daughter in the flashback are them. She says she found Kay through his presence and wants to go back home together and to bring Dekamoto with them. She'll bring him to the afterlife. Kay defends him, but gets held by her mom. More Doujin stuff happens, and Dekamoto begins waking up to them talking. Kay says she wants him to live, so she'll go back home on her own. He wakes up and asks her mom if he can have her daughter and bites both of their ring fingers to symbolize them getting married. He says he won't give her back to a mother that would take her by force. Her mom starts crying and says she can't pass on due to her regrets and has been looking for her, so she'll resort to force. Suddenly, the person who climbed out of the monk's well earlier bursts through the door, and it's revealed to be Dekamoto's grandmother. Since Kay's mother married into Dekamoto's family, she knows everyone and scolds her into not passing on. She then drags her away, and Kay says one last thing to her mom. Afterwards, Dekamoto ends up inheriting the inn and finds a hidden fortune that his grandma told him about. The inn becomes successful because a client accidentally saw Kay, and it became a rumor that their inn was haunted, giving lots of business. Let me know what you think of this Doujin. Title is called Lady Kay and the Sick Man by Rororogi Mogera. Codes for each chapter on screen now.